Councilmember Bragg,
Here.
Councilmember Spriggs,
Here.
Councilmember Bilbray,
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Patton,
Here.
Mayor Janney.
Here. Do you all please stand and join me in a pledge allegiance? Pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Moving on to mayor council. Oh, we'll start with agenda changes. Do we have any requests for agenda changes this evening? Mr. Spriggs?
Mr. Mayor, sorry I didn't have a chance to advise the city manager of this earlier, but I'd like to ask that we pull from the consent calendar when we had binders, it was easier to find things.
I've already lodged that complaint.
The stop sign item from the 2.4.
Okay, so I'll make a motion that we take item 2.4 at the end of the agenda this evening.
Great.
We have a motion and a second. Could we please vote on that?
Motion carried unanimously.
Thank you. Now we'll move on to mayor council reimbursements, disclosures, and community announcements. Ms. Bragg?
Thank you. On behalf of the council, I attended the South Bay Union School District celebration of their 2014 Employees of the Year. And on behalf of the council, I did present proclamations to their classified Employee of the Year, Doreen Wick, and their certificated Employee of the Year was Rebecca Bankston. And it was, it really brought the message home. It takes a village to raise a child. And it's amazing. Some of these teachers and classified employees have been there so many years, and they all know every child's name, what school they go to, how many years they've all worked together. And it truly was an honor to be able to be there and present the proclamations on behalf of you, Mayor, especially. Councilmember Patton was unable to join me there. I know he was trying his darndest to make it, but it was really a joy, Mayor. Thank you for allowing me to do it.
You're welcome. Thank you very much for being there. Mr. Spriggs?
Yes, some people have all the fun. Meanwhile, I was slogging away in wastewater issues with regard to the Metro JPA and our concerns expressed several times here at the council on presentations regarding the very complex county-wide effort to create potable reuse of our water. And there was incidentally an excellent piece on NPR this morning on how Las Vegas is reusing 94% of its water. All of this in connection with avoiding a huge $3 billion plus price tag to convert Point Loma sewage treatment plant to secondary treatment and leaving it where it is right now at advanced primary, and reducing the flow there by converting to potable reuse. Our concerns have been that a portion of that reduction necessary to enable Point Loma to stay within those standards might be diverted to the South Bay. So the city manager, Andy Hall, arranged a meeting with the San Diego Public Works officials, the senior people, including Hala Razak, who's the new Public Works Director. And I was fortunate to be able to attend in my capacity as our representative to the Metro Wastewater Joint Powers Authority. And it was a very good meeting. I think they heard what we had to say. And we have also met subsequently to that and sent them a letter thanking them for the meeting, indicating where we thought we had points of agreement and where we still need to have a discussion. So I thank the city manager and Hank Levine, who was there, our own public works director, for allowing me to participate with them in that discussion. And it's just it's an ongoing discussion. Tomorrow there's a Metro JPA meeting. This subject is perennially on the agenda. The overall program is perennially on the agenda, and I will continue to raise our concerns about water quality impacts here in Imperial Beach in that forum as well.
Thank you, and just because you brought that up, and I know that you've been working hard on that, and hopefully with assistance to what you're trying to do, I've had conversations with the interim mayor of San Diego and expressed some of the concerns along with folks from the San Diego County Water Authority and some of the other cities so that they understand why we're looking at it a little differently than they would, but I think that might help you out in the long run.
That's great. And the connection to the council, of course, is that all of the cities who are participating in the Metro JPA have been asked to pass resolutions, city council resolutions, in support of this overall program. And we've considered a couple different versions of that resolution here at different meetings of this city council, and we're still not quite satisfied that we're at the point where we can adopt a resolution without some of these issues being a little more clearly worked out. So that puts it back to the context of where we are here as a
And could I
city
ask, do you
council.
have any time ideas when you want to bring that back to the council?
I think we need that next round of conversations.
Before we bring back a
you know,
res-
with the
okay.
with the city staff, the public works senior staff, as far as what they're going, how far they're willing to move towards us on this before we can set a time.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Bilbray? Mr. Patton?
Yes, I went to the San Diego EDC meeting yesterday morning, where basically I get to go listen to a lot of people talk about how great their cities are, and I get to brag about our city. One person in general came up and spoke about the possibility of having the Olympics here in San Diego 2024, and for us to get on the short list. And he made a really good point of saying what just happened in Sochi was them basically building Olympic type resorts in Julian. That's what they did. We don't need to do that in San Diego. We have approximately 34 of the 37 venues already. So our hope, or his hope, and San Diego's hope is to get on the short list, and that is their next thing. You get on the short list of 3, and then you go from there. So it's pretty exciting things happening here in San Diego. Possibility of Olympics in 10 years.
Thank you, and I have nothing to report this evening. Mr. Hall?
Mayor and council, at your last meeting, there was a concern raised about perhaps racial profiling that could or may be happening in our community. Just wanted to report back to the council that I met with the department heads and confirmed, and want to let you know that in this community, there is no racial profiling or profiling of any sort based on race, religion, creed, sexual preference, or any other characteristic of individuals. So I just wanted to let you know we do take that seriously. We did talk about it and confirm none of that is happening in our community.
Thank you. Moving on to public comments. Madam Clerk, do we have any speaker slips?
No, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Moving on then to consent calendar. Items 2.1, 2, and 3. We have taken 2.4 to the end of the agenda, so I'd entertain a motion for items 2.1, 2, and 3. We have a motion and a second. Any comments? Could we please vote?
Motion carried unanimously.
Thank you. Moving on to item 3.1, Mr. Hall.
Mayor and council, we're seeking the introduction of an ordinance and first reading by title only of a speed study that was conducted in our community, which happens on a regular basis. Mr. Levine would like to talk to you about 2 instances where the speed limits will be changed. Other than the 2 that he will point out, all of the speed limits will remain the same.
I can, council, mayor and council, I have the table or the layout showing all the different streets if you'd like to look at that. Specifically, this, let me just go ahead and call it up. Specifically the streets that are, I don't, actually, I guess I didn't get it here. Somebody, I thought they had put it up for me, but it isn't. But you have it on your agenda. The 2 streets that have changed from the last report, which was a year ago. And the reason that this is a change is twofold. One, we discovered that the regulations that have been set up to evaluate what is an accepted 85th percentile was not used in our report to you in February, March of 2013. So we updated that. Second, Palm Avenue between 3rd and 7th was under construction at the time we did the survey. So we came to you and said that even though the survey showed that we should be going to 40 miles an hour on that section of the street, we were going to defer any changes in speeds until we had a survey reconducted, which was done in December of 13, about 6 months after the project was completed. The new survey showed, and the new regulations showed that we could leave it at 35 on Palm Avenue between 3rd and 7th. Additionally, it showed that we could reduce the speed on Elm Avenue, which previously had been at 30, between 7th and the eastern city limits to 25. The other changes that you saw on the chart, which were the ones on 13th Street north of Palm, and also the Old Palm area, the Palm Avenue between Seacoast and 3rd, and the old study had been were reduced to 25 for Palm between Seacoast and 3rd, and then 30 miles an hour on 13th north of Highway 75. Those were posted from the previous study, and that didn't change. So we're recommending that you adopt the first reading of the ordinance that puts these into place.
Okay, thank you. Do we have any speaker slips in this item, Madam Clerk?
No, Mr. Mayor.
Do we have any questions for staff on this particular item? I'm kind of happy on some of the results. We are lowering some speed limits there. I think that was very good on that part. Please, Mr. Patton. Oh, no, yes.
A lot of these routes I take daily, and I know there's a survey. One street is at Rainbow, from State 75 to Palm Avenue. It's barely a 1/10 of a mile long. I go on that daily, and 30 miles an hour. That's incredibly fast. I tried it today at 30 miles an hour, and literally I thought I was on the freeway. And I feel sorry for people going 30 miles an hour and people trying to turn into the restaurants or to the gym or to a residential street. It's, I mean, a 1/10 of a mile, 30 miles an hour, you have to try hard to go that fast. But I'm sure a lot of people like to go that fast. And another one, just going down Palm from 3rd to 7th, that's at 35. Maybe I'm just a slow driver. But today, I think I drive about 30 on that every day. And today I was going 35 on there, and again, it seemed incredibly fast. And I don't know about other council members, what their speeds are on those streets, but for me, that both of those seem a little excessive. That's just my comment.
I can only go by what the radar showed when they were recording it during the time frame that they recorded it, and we're bound to follow those the data that was
Right,
recorded.
yeah, I understand that.
So, I don't disagree with you on Palm Avenue in particular. I go down there and I'm surprised that they're saying 85th percentile at 35 miles an hour, but they're firm that that's what the records are showing.
And I also understand if we did lower the speed limit, it would be unenforceable, correct?
That's correct, sir.
Yeah, so I just want to make that.
I
put that out
think
there.
if I could, Mayor, just on Rainbow, it's one of the streets that we'll talk about in the next agenda item, but, and it's one of the streets that we need to, do an overlay job here in the next few years. It's a very wide street. I believe there are some things we can do striping wise, to, create an environment where the traffic is going to be inclined to go slower. And my hope is to work with a traffic engineer with striping and designs that can help do that. I don't know how successful we'll be, but
Well, I
try
think
it.
you've been fairly successful in other areas with some of the improvements you've done with sidewalks and bulb outs and things like that. So I know that was a lot of the intent of those improvements.
Yes, sir.
So hopefully
Ho-
that. Mike-
Hopefully no speed bumps.
No.
It will not be part of the discussion.
Question, because I understand Mr. Patton's concerns, how often do we relook at these?
And I don't know the specific criteria. There are three trigger points in the MUTCD and the vehicle code. One is at the five-year point. Typically, it's at the 7-year point. If at 7 years, the traffic engineer certifies there has been no significant changes to suggest that the traffic flows or traffic patterns would be different, he can write
I'm trying to
No,
go the other
describe it to
direction.
the
I'm not
tent.
trying to make it longer in between. I'm trying to say,
You wanna do
like
it
say
quick,
if you
more
were gonna do
recent, more
Rainbow
frequent?
Drive, would we be able to relook at Rainbow after you do those improvements?
there's not, to my knowledge, there's nothing that says we can't do it more frequently. But, we have to do it at those one of those trigger points.
But I think because you're talking about improvements such as Rainbow, the goal, besides the improvements, we would probably like to request that you look at it earlier after you've made your improvements.
Okay? Sure.
I just think that would be one way to look at it and be able to, that particular stretch. The other one, I don't see us doing any work on, so I mean, that was how we did the Palm Avenue from Third to Delaware, was because we knew we did that. So that's just a comment I have on, maybe we should look at it again after he is able to do that work. Please.
Mr. Levine, what are the other two triggers? Is one of them the number of tickets issued or accidents?
No, it is, to my knowledge, and I can bring that back to you in FOII or something like that if it's something city manager would like. But my understanding is that it's triggered by noticeable or reasonable changes that have been made. Let's say a new development or a new shopping center or reconstruction of the street, which would reconfigure it in certain ways like we did Palm Avenue. It has to be there should be a reason for it to go more frequently.
Okay. Thank you.
Please.
This is at risk of stepping on the sleeping dog. It's not listed on here, but we had a controversial discussion on a couple occasions regarding Route 75 around the bend, where the traffic survey said, I think 45, and it's 40 right now. It still says 40. I'm happy about that. I'm sure other council members who disagreed, all of us were unanimous and strongly disagreeing with, who was it? Caltrans, who were imposing a higher speed limit in that area against the wishes of the city council. So I don't want to wake up a sleeping dog, but it's it's where it is right now, and that's fine, and I think that's a good thing. Whatever has happened, to leave it the way it is cool.
I did have a conversation with one of the members of traffic engineer for our area, and he said it's still on their agenda list to do. I'm not sure why they haven't done it yet, but he assured me that it was going to be posted 45.
Times where it's good for the city to drag its feet.
And
There
I
are
have not,
times
I
maybe
have
when it's
not
not.
initiated any discussion on it from my part.
And I think if we look at it from our discussion when we had the Caltrans folks here, it might be getting to the point where we asked to have it resurveyed. And the time frame is gonna probably be right about there, cause that was one thought, is to ask them to resurvey it. Maybe we could do that before they actually put the sign out. Because their timing, if you remember, it was quite a while ago that they came and talked to us, so.
That's a good idea, Mr. Mayor, because once they put the 45 sign up there and it's surveyed,
That's-
then we can forget it.
Agree, I agree. So maybe we should, look at when our conversation with Caltrans was, look at our records and see, I think we talked about within a year or something like that. I don't remember exactly. That was here at a council meeting, so it should be on the record someplace. Oh. So it's been almost 2 years. So,
Yeah, I think it was 2012.
I mean, I'm willing to talk to them if that's what we wanna do. I just don't wanna get them to put the 45 up yet. So, we'll see what you find out.
Yes, sir.
So we have before us, is adoption of an ordinance, introduction of the ordinance, 2014-1144. And I ask the city clerk to read the title of the ordinance.
Ordinance number 2014-1144, an ordinance of the City Council of the City of Imperial Beach, California, amending section 10.28.020 of the Imperial Beach Municipal Code related to the designation of special speed zones.
In that case, I'd like to entertain a motion to introduce and hold the first reading of the ordinance 2014-1144 by title only, waive further reading in full, and schedule a second reading by title only and adoption of the ordinance at our March 19th meeting. We have a motion and a second. Further discussion? Could we please vote?
Motion carried unanimously.
Moving on to item 4.1, declare the public hearing open. Mr. Hall?
Mayor and council, the next item is the Regional Transportation Improvement Program. And the Public Works Director has submitted the streets that we plan to improve over the next few years to Sandag. And I don't know if there's any questions, but Hank's here to answer those questions. One thing I would point out to you is that we got some last-minute information from Sandag, and that is your last-minute information packet that you received this evening. It simply took what was a previous form and put the roads into a newly created format that they were using at Sandag. So the information is relatively the same, although there are some changes in the numbers. But with that, Hank, I don't know if you have anything to add, but essentially this is the transportation improvements that we'll be making on our roads in the coming years.
The other change was on page 2 of the staff report under the fiscal impact. The funds that were available based on the most recent data from Sandag for Transnet was revised to $3,548,000 from the 4.4 before, I think it was, mil. So it was, they were showing $1 million less than what we thought we had.
They were showing $1 million, or we were showing?
We had 4.5 with you on the original staff report, and the current one is that they gave us just this week was $3.5 million
And that's
projected over the next 5 years.
projected over the next 5, because I know that the economic projections for, because Transnet sales tax, that, you know, the economy has done some and they've had to readjust what their figures were. But that's what the numbers they give you for 5 years in.
It is, sir. And they're, as you probably know, they're adjusted every quarter based on actual sales. And then once, after they follow the actual sales for a while, they'll revise the estimates for future years up or down based on what the track record is.
Okay. Do we have any other questions for Mr. Levine on this? Mr. Spriggs?
Just that's a pretty big adjustment, $1 million, which we could use obviously on our streets. What do you suppose? I don't want you to speculate, too much beyond your knowledge, but what could account for what's essentially, a 20% change in the amount, maybe a little bit more, from the previous projection, especially if it's done quarterly?
We believe, and we still do believe, that there is money that we have not drawn from prior quarters that is waiting for us to draw from it, and they do not account for it in this, which I did in the original staff report I gave you, that there's undrawn funds still sitting at Sandag to be as part of this program and waiting for us to ask for it. They're claiming that's not the case. That's still to be determined. But this here gives you exactly what they're estimating for the next 5 years, not accounting for any reserves they're holding for us.
Would it be appropriate, Mr. Mayor, for us to ask Mr. Levine to come back after further exploration of where these funds whether they're still there for us or not? These carry forward balances from previous years that we can account for, but apparently Sandag is accounting differently, because it does add up to quite a bit of resources for our city.
You can do that if the mayor, if that's a
I was
request, or
thinking
I
that-
can do it in FYI.
I'm going to personally look into that. I'm downtown at Sandag for some other stuff on Friday, and I will bring it up. Actually, when's the transportation committee, so I'll bring it up and try to see if they can clarify it for us. And bring up the fact that Mr. Levine thinks it's part of the reserves that we didn't draw down in the past. Oh, no, I agree with you. Well, actually, they can't really take them anywhere else. If they're ours, it's just we've got to find what bank account they're in. So. Any more questions for Mr. Levine on this item? Do we have any public speaker slips on this item?
No, Mr. Mayor.
In that case, I close the public hearing and then entertain a motion to adopt a resolution 2014-7456. We have a motion and a second. Could we please vote?
Motion carried unanimously.
Moving right on to item 5.1. This is an appointment to fill a special vacancy on the Oversight Board. Mr. Fernandez, who had served well on that board, gave us a notice that he was going to be resigning. We advertised for people interested in serving the community, on this case on the Oversight Board. We only had one applicant for that, Mr. Jim King, who, even though just a one applicant, definitely is qualified. He has the background to look at these kind of things, and I would like to make the appointment of Mr. King to the Oversight Board with your concurrence. It's technically a mayor's appointment, but I think it's fair to you all to do a motion and a second, and we'll vote on it as a group. We have a motion and a second. Any discussion on that item? Any speaker slips on this item?
No, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. So we have a motion and a second. All in favor of Mr. King being appointed to Oversight Board?
Motion carried unanimously.
moving on to item 5.2. Mr. Hall, this is more of a discussion item. It's more of a policy discussion. So as we've done in a few meetings in the past, it's more kind of an open discussion on this. It was requested that we discuss advisory boards and commissions. The council voted on putting this on our agenda this evening. So what we have this evening is basically a discussion of where the council might think, with the consideration of all the different factors of being able to engage more of the community in some of the thought processes that we go through. The staff has put together some information on what other cities have done. And I myself have talked to many cities out there as far as what they're really looking at. And I think that probably it is the time that we probably engage some folks. I'm looking at, there's 18 cities in San Diego, and I have to say that I don't really look at the city of San Diego. They're kind of a different thing, and there's a couple of very large cities out there. But one of the things, and we've been dealing with for quite some time, is parks and recreation. And looking at most cities and communities, they do have a Parks and Recreation Commission made up of folks in the public to give us advice on what they think are the needs and how things are working with our parks. It could be a combination, in my opinion, of a parks rec. We could put in a youth component. It doesn't have to be the way somebody else put the thing together. I think that's something that we probably are ready to do. I think it's a very good thing. I think people are interested in not only their children's recreation, but there's adults, the seniors out there. We can try to make better use of the assets within the city, and perhaps it should be some inputs from some of the folks in the community, and I think this is a very good one. A couple other thoughts I personally have, and I know that the staff has put out a long list, and Mr. Patton was just at a meeting on Tuesday. There's several communities that have engaged with nonprofit organization, in this case the San Diego Foundation, for putting together what they call community foundations. It's not necessarily a city hall driven function. There is a little bit of a participation from that, but from everything I can gather is they help put together a group of volunteers to work with organizations within the community, and it's more like a fundraising to be able to put other things out there to the community. I mean, I know that Chula Vista has one, they're a larger city, but even San Ysidro, even though they're just a community within the city of San Diego. And it's something that we could engage with the San Diego Foundation to see how we could start one up. And I'm looking at the membership and what they do. It's working with some of the partners that the community has, such as our EDCOs and our Cox Communications, and then also other members of the community that want to really enhance what we can do. And it's, in a sense, it's a fundraising, but it also gets a lot of people engaged in what else they can do. I think that's something that I think would be a nice to pursue. It's not completely city. I'm not sure if we, appoint somebody from the city from this thing, but then it's more or less they set it up from what I understand. And I'm not totally understanding how it works, but I think it's something that could be very good. We've had different, calls for things within our city or actions within our city that take funding, but it's not necessarily a pure city function. And this might help that. And then another thought, and I'd like to thank Councilmember Spriggs, is one of the things we're getting involved in a lot is sea level rise. We've applied for grants. We're working on grants. I think we're very well poised to it. Of course, we're a coastal community, and I think it would be advisable to have a subcommittee of the city council, 2 members, along with engaging some community organizations, some scientific organizations, to see where we're going to go with these things. I mean, to have a grant and work on it and study it, we want to see what we can do in the future. And I think it might also poise us to be able to reach out and get further grant funding. Mr. Spriggs, in a conversation he and I had, is that the next step is to get funding to do something as well. And we might be in a great spot. We're small enough that people can engage us. We have a great presence with the estuary folks that really work on a lot of these things. That sea level rise could really affect that. That's one of the great assets of Imperial Beach, but also the properties along our beachfront and bayfront. So I'm looking at this, and those are a couple of things I think would be really good, and it starts that concept of bringing more folks. Hopefully, we just had an item on the agenda where we asked for volunteers in a case, and we got one applicant. Hopefully, there's more people that would like to engage in some of these things. I think that's part of our thing, is to make sure that they feel like they're actually doing something. That's why the Parks and Recs, Community Foundation things, and of course Sea Level Rise and how we approach that, might be something that we would like to bring back, because this evening it's a discussion, and then the staff would put together what it would take to put one of these together, whether it be a Parks and Recs or a budget committee. I mean, we do that only 2 years. That could be one that we just set up for the 6 months prior to a budget cycle, so that we can get a feel from the community on it, but also to educate them at where we're going. I mean, those are some of the thoughts of what a small city might want to do. There's always the consideration of the staff time, but I think that a lot of it has to do with engaging folks out there. So I'd open it up for some discussion. I'll start with you, Mr. Spriggs.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm delighted that this item's on the agenda. Thank you, Mr. Bilbray. We've talked about more community engagement needed from time to time on the council, and I'm a strong advocate of more community engagement. I mean, we had a few citizen participation opportunities early in my residency here in Imperial Beach, which enabled me to get involved and have led to me sitting here today. In my view, you know, a small community like this, we could be a model community for citizen participation. We're a small city. It's possible for, it should be possible for citizens all over Imperial Beach to be involved in one or more issues of concern to them and that are also of concern to Imperial Beach. And if we think about this, we need to think about it in a way that doesn't become all-consuming in terms of the staff time needed to support that kind of civic engagement, because that is an element. And whether or not we would have, but that is a constraint, and I don't believe we should be thinking about constraints right now. We ought to be thinking about, you know, how we can improve public participation. And it leads to more information coming to us as policymakers for the city. It leads to more input. It leads to a better feeling out in the community of involvement. It certainly leads to ownership by community engaged committees of those issues, and therefore possibly some differing approaches, problems, but it's bringing more information to the table. And that's really what democracy is all about. And I'm really excited by this. I mean, this is really a wonderful opportunity. And I think the point you made about it, I've said before, we could open our budget process and try to find ways to get more public participation. And I've been to a workshop on that subject and would like to, you know, I could present that material at some point in time. When we had the League of California Cities, there was a public budgeting process and workshop that some cities, process that some cities are using. I think we could also, I'd just like to put on the table at the same time, Mr. Mayor, consistent with this, the idea that we should be using volunteers and interns a lot more in our town, from everything from high school students, and we have Mar Vista, and students needing to get practical work experiences to help them think about their careers and what they want to do next. Same thing with university students. I like your point about the sea level rise and having people involved in that. We need to think about whether we should incorporate that into the scope of the Tidelands Advisory Committee, possibly, which is staff supported. And on an issue like this that's technical, and that where we have some grant money for studies that are going to be very technical and have lots of nuances to them, charging TAC to do that kind of analysis and report to us might, with some staff support that's already built in, might be a possible way to go there. I like the idea of community foundations. There's, you know, as we evolve as a city to being more open to visitor serving, as well as more opportunities for our own citizens to do things. I mean, a community foundation could sponsor things like art shows on, you know, on our streets. Seacoast Drive would be a great place for it, or even live performances. You know, we could invigorate our community tremendously with community foundations and some of these other volunteer opportunities that you're talking about, Mr. Mayor. So I'm excited about it. I think there's you know, that we ought to have the vision of a lot more participation and a very active community and opportunities for everybody to get engaged and a better information flow all over the community. And I think this is a great start tonight.
Ms. Bragg?
Thank you. Mr. Bilbray, I too would like to thank you for bringing this forward. And for me, it's kind of going back to, like you, when you had said you served on some commissions and boards, and that's what led to you being here tonight. I too walked in those shoes, being on the Cultural Arts Board and the Film Commission, and you know, seeing the demise of some of those boards due to staffing levels, and it was sad because a great many volunteers stepped forward and become embedded in the fabric of our community. And I like the idea of the community foundation. When I was with the Chamber of Commerce, one day I took a busload of organizations, leaders in organizations, and we went down to the San Diego Foundation, and what we were doing was looking for grants for those organizations and how they could help these communities and how they could help their own organizations. So that's kind of an idea, you know, coming back full circle, which is always nice to see. One of the ones that really caught my eye, though, that I thought might be interesting to delve a little bit more into would be economic development, and then also the Parks and Rec, and going back to the Cultural Arts Board. What you spoke about, Mr. Spriggs, one of their tasks that they brought forward was performances, art shows, those kinds of things. So, you know, deciding as a community what we want, and then tasking whatever, you know, board or commission that we think it fits appropriately is really attractive to me. The city of Carlsbad has a staff member that is a volunteer coordinator, and that's all this person does for the city of Carlsbad. And she oversees, and I could not believe the number, but she oversees 40,000 volunteers on an annual basis. Well, that's more than our population, but I just found that so amazing. Of course, the city of Carlsbad is quite a bit larger than ours, but it's comparable. So if they have, a city that size has 40,000, what does the city of our size have? How many volunteers would come forward to assist us in, you know, bettering this community? So I'm excited to see where this could go. Exciting to see maybe some of these old commissions bring them back.
Well, I think and I haven't heard from your other two colleagues here yet, but we have to be a little careful. I think that the idea is to engage more, but we don't want to just go so far. And that's when I started off saying Parks and Recs. The community foundation, what I thought was unique, and I might be wrong because we haven't looked into it, was that it was actually assisted so much by the San Diego Foundation that it takes a little bit of the stress off of the staff. The sea level, I see Mr. Spriggs's point that we do have a Tidelands, and we'd like to keep them engaged instead of things, and it might be something along those lines. I was also hoping that there would be some kind of council participation, because we've got so much going on there that we want to keep ourselves informed. I mean, I know that the staff works with these folks when we're doing some of these grant works. We need to make sure we keep getting the feedback and then try to figure out where we can go for more. But I do think we need to be a little careful about how much we want at the beginning here. And that's why I'd take some of those that we know we could do really well with, which was the parks. Really at that time, we need to do that. But I noticed on the list, you know, youth commissions, there a way to roll it into one and say that we want a commission that consists of X amount of youth representation, so we can consider that. I do have a couple speaker slips in the item, since I don't see any. I could go strictly to public speakers first, or do you want to go ahead and speak first?
I'll wait.
Okay. Erica Lowry?
Honorable Mayor and Council, I come before you tonight to encourage civic growth and participation, especially in our youth, by greatly expanding the community boards and commissions. Now, in the time that I posted this on Facebook that I was speaking on this, I received numerous texts from community members saying, I support this, I support this, I support this. Could I bring this up to council? The ones I feel very strong about are the Youth Commission, and thank you for a better acronym. My son will appreciate that. Parks and Recreation Committee to engage beyond our youth, and I would also propose a dog park commission. Any growth in the civic community relations would be a great improvement for our community. I strongly believe in a youth commission to build our future leaders, engage them to encourage a desire for civic service. And I hate to say it, but high school is too late. By then, they've already found their niches, they found their cliques. I would actually want to engage them in their lost years between 5th and 8th grade. This is when our youth are in that finding their niche. And this would be the perfect time to engage them in what they want to see in their community, what activities they want to see for them in their age groups. It would also provide a transition from the sports park task force to something more permanent that our youth can engage in. At the other end, I would like to see a Parks and Recreation Committee to engage our aging generation in what they would like to see activities for themselves and pass on their knowledge to the youth. Everything from embroidery to car mechanics to even the history of our community. It's being lost with our aging generation, and we want to pass that on to our youth. This way they can also have their voices heard. Finally, the new Dog Park Commission. Councils in past have heard a public cry for a designated dog park commission, a dog park where dogs can be off leash. Candace Unger and I are working on procuring a grant through the Great Neighborhood Challenge through the San Diego Foundation. So if you need help with that, I can help you. That would be designated for an off-leash dog park here in Imperial Beach. It is an enormous challenge that will take talents from numerous members of the city and the community at large. But by creating this commission, the city will acknowledge the need for a dog park in the community, the voices that have come in the past to the city for a dog park, and provide an opportunity for growth for a large population of the city. Please think seriously about all these groups, as well as expanding any opportunity for the community at large in civic engagement. Thank you.
Thank you. Serge Dedina?
Serge Dedina, 652 Donix Avenue. First, thanks for bringing this issue up. I was appointed to the Youth Commission when I was 15 by Pat's dad when he was mayor, and then I think I was 22 or 23, and I was at the beach one day complaining about something, and Kiki Wasserman said, you need to be on the Tidelands Advisory Committee, and literally, I think the next day I was. So, and it was really cool. We used to sit in the back somewhere at a table, and we actually helped plan the reconstruction of the IB Pier. So, we are already a leadership community. Wild Coast worked with the Kiwanis, the IB Boys and Girls Club, and the IB Health Center to form the IB Collaborative recently, where we got together all the organizations that work together in IB, and we met recently the Boys and Girls Club, and the idea is to really start working together better. City Manager Andy Hall was there. It was great, and so I think that's, we don't have to be formal. We can create, like this idea of a dog park committee. We can create ad hoc committees, just like the sports park committee recently helped solve the sports park issue. I'd like to see committees focus on tasks. So a dog park committee would be great. How about an ugly fence committee? We get rid of ugly fences. How about a community garden committee? An events committee would be awesome. You know, a summer concert series committee. The more that we can do that is sort of less formal and more ad hoc and brings people together and empowers people to actually help solve problems without having really the city to be there would be really cool. Ed, I think your Seacoaster group has been brilliant. I think I'd like to see a Palm Avenue committee. We could do the same thing with Palm Avenue. There's no reason why we couldn't have committees for each neighborhood in town. We could have a coastal, a coastal district. We could have an East Side committee, a North Side committee. We could have a Center City committee and the South Side committee, which is really important, especially when we have a community, with a lot of low-income folks. Half our community is Hispanic, and frankly, we have no Hispanic representation at all at any level in the city, which is a concern to me. So we're essentially excluding a large percentage of our community by not having this sort of civic engagement structure. And the fact is, we have amazing leaders in this community. We have people who served in Afghanistan, Iraq, and Vietnam, in the Korean War. We have people who've either serve or have served in the military, they are trained to be leaders, and we need to really take advantage of that. So this is a great start. There are organizations like the San Diego Foundation, and I think it's the Center for Policy Initiatives and other organizations that actually work with cities to train, to help build leadership and capacity build on engaging in committees. So I think that would be somewhere to go. We might want to have a committee or an ad hoc committee on committees and really sort of start thinking about how we can do that. But it's a great idea. Civic engagement's really important, and we need to build the next generation of leadership. It's great that we've got, Pat, you're the youngest person on the committee, and your dad was committed to, to building leadership in the city, which is why you appointed a lot of young folks to committees. But we've got to do more. We've got to be better than we are. We have the lowest level of civic engagement of any community in San Diego County. We have the smallest number of groups of any city by far. The average number of any coastal city in San Diego is 12, and excluding City of San Diego. In the South Bay, Coronado, Chula Vista, National City, and IB, the average number is 15. So thank you very much.
Mr. Patton?
Yeah, I listened to some people on the community community foundations, and they have passionate, and they are so into what they're doing and volunteering. And it seems to me that that community foundation can be a pretty big umbrella and cover a lot of different topics, and I think that'd be good. I agree with the mayor on item 7, Parks and Rec Commission and Youth Commission. Definitely that could be folded into one, especially with Sports Park, which I know is going to be successful, but in 18 months we're going to have to relook at that again. It'd be good to have some sort of commission to be there to help us. Looking at item 6 there, the Human Relations Commission, I call that maybe Public Relations Commission, using a lot of technology and making things very clear what we're doing and transparent. Bringing in a lot of the business and private sector on that. And also the Community Foundation can do the sandcastle, maybe possibly fireworks, different events, triathlons, things like that. So there's a lot of things that our city can do. So I'm glad that we're looking at these, and we just have to narrow it down to make it manageable and doable. It's almost like making a to-do list, because I look at my to-do list, sometimes there's 30 items, and I have to realistically look at it again, what I actually can do. And so I think we need to make it at least starting point, what can we actually do? Thank you.
Mr. Bilberg?
I think we're all on the same page that, we're not going to be able to do them all. But I came in here just wanting to get things started. And I picked 3. And I think we've all heard that we want a Parks and Rec for the most part, especially with what we're going through with Sports Park. And it's not just for the community. It's really also for us. I mean, we don't want to be blindsided like we did before. We need to have some feelers out there to really tell us what the public's feeling. But I think we're also overlooking the fact that we don't have a proper planning commission, and that was a big concern of mine for a long time. I believe that there is a legal issue here. We've effectively gotten rid of due process in the city. The appeals process, you appeal to the same people that turned you down the first time, and to me that's a lawsuit waiting to happen, and it's the right thing to do of relinquishing that power from us and properly appoint a board and give it the full power underneath the California Constitution.
So basically where we want to try to go then is to give staff an idea that pick a couple low-hanging fruits to say work on these, bring them back, see what it takes to put them together, and then try to give it some sense of where it is. I mean, these are city designated committees. I mean, that's what we're looking at here, whether it be a Parks and Rec or a youth or whatever it is. That's ones that we're driving on. If there's others that are trying to drive different, there's obviously other volunteers out there that do a lot more things than to deal with City Hall other than maybe a permit once in a while. So is there a feeling for which ones we want staff to study and talk to us about and bring it back? And then don't necessarily bring them all back at the same time, but to say, let's have a discussion. This is the way a Parks and Rec with a youth group into it would look like, so that we could say this is what we want to set up. Because there's a little bit of staff work just to put one together, and then we got to go out and hopefully get folks that want to participate.
actually, there's a lot of other cities that are doing the same thing we're doing, or what we want to do. And you could Google Parks and Rec committees and youth committees, and you can get some pretty good ideas out there.
Oh, no, I agree.
Yeah,
There's
yeah.
a lot out there. And there's several, I mean, the list that the staff put together is great, but I've seen some others, and some of them got some extremely interesting acronyms, and I don't really know what they were doing, but they sounded really good. So, could we perhaps get together and say, let's look at 3 or something like that right now? I mean, there's 15 or so on the list. We're not gonna get all 15 right off the bat.
I think we have a strong consensus, Mr. Mayor, that Parks, Rec, and Youth,
And senior.
could be combined. Youth and
It's
seniors,
Parks and Recs will include all residents.
right, exactly. Yeah, I think that's a good point, yeah, seniors indeed. I think we already have a Sandcastle committee, that's, formed and running fast, and, liaises quite well, my understanding is, with the city. We probably don't need to touch that until we see how they do with this upcoming Sandcastle. And there may need to be some help there if we're going to, and more city engagement, if we're going to really have a consistent and growing Sandcastle that begins to put IB back on the map for our iconic annual event. So I'd say that's something we don't have to deal with right now, but we ought to keep an eye on maybe as a council and see how it goes.
You're right. Just a little background on that Sandcastle committee. The only reason my father appointed 2 council members is because they were already working with sandcastles. So in order for them to meet, they had to be appointed or something around there.
Right.
He just wanted the publicity, probably.
No comment. I think I would just ask for support for the idea of a little bit more. I don't have another one here that I think rises quite to the level of Parks and Rec at this moment in time. I think if we can do something well on that, we'll be really getting a good start. But 2 other comments. We ought to be open to, I like the idea of unstaffed, informal citizens committees, but there needs to be some sort of understanding, and I don't know how this would be created, that they actually are composed in a way that will have credibility when they come before the council to make recommendations. And it's not just, it's not totally ad hoc.
Can I ask a question of Ms. Bragg? Because when you were on Cultural Arts Board, was there staff participation in all your meetings?
Yes, there
So
was,
even
and the
once-
film
even-
commission as well.
So even when that we feel like might not be as staffed, it still was staffed though, right?
Because the staff did the agenda, they did,
Yeah.
Any action items
I
that we were
wasn't
going
aware,
to.
so.
So that gets to the third thing I would like to see staff think about a little bit more, and I've had conversations with the mayor about this offline over many months, and as well as the city manager, and that's this whole idea of volunteers and interns. I've run into several young recent college grads, one in particular, who would love nothing more than to be the city's intern coordinator and work with other young people and be a mentor and supervisor. And of course, there'd be a staff position, there'd be a salary involved there. But the multiplier effect, the benefit of having someone like that, a volunteer coordinator, would mean that we would get the energy and efforts of high school and college interns. And that's the context in which I mentioned high school, because when you want an intern, it's a little different if you're going to have a youth committee or something like that. Yeah, you want to have younger people involved, but when you're talking about interns where you're depending on a certain level of maturity and ability to work on projects on their own, you're really talking about, high school or college at that point. This comes from a lot of experience. And we could get a lot. In fact, there are there are high school, there are college interns, especially if they're juniors or seniors, who could actually support community organizations. Instead of city staff, they could take notes, they could make phone calls, coordinate meetings, help them do research, gather materials. Wonderful internship opportunity for college students that are interested in civic engagement and really doing something meaningful, which is what college students are all about these days, is doing something meaningful with their community service. And in some cases, they could get academic credit for this. So with them under the supervision of a single city volunteer coordinator, who could also help with some of these other committees, as Councilmember Bragg pointed out is the case in Carlsbad, we could get this huge amount of support and activity in the community that would be supported. And I just think it's something I'd like to ask if we could just explore that a little bit further, because I think it's a substitute for city staff supporting all these committees, and at the same time has the benefit of helping our students really get something out of it and creating future leaders, you know, for not only this community but other communities that those students may end up in.
And just to know, I believe it was today, we do have an intern. We're working with our Human Resources Department of one. So, and it's a San Diego State, sorry, not UCSD, but it was an intern from that, and I think that that's something that really makes a lot of difference as far as trying to engage them. I think the idea is, and I think the staff will put it on the list of things that we're working on here. Thank you. Ms. Bragg?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would like to dovetail on that a little bit. You know, one of the things I believe, and maybe in our audience, Chris Brown could maybe nod her head, but I believe that it's a requirement when you graduate that you have to have so many hours of community service. And so many times students have come to City Hall wanting to fulfill those hours, and they're not able to because of certain constraints. I think that's something that we really need to look at, because if we've got students knocking on our door saying, please help me fulfill my community service, and we shut the doors because of they're not 18 or there's liability issues, I just want to say, really? That's just crazy. You know, so I think that if while we're looking at this, the inclusion of high school students who are needing to fulfill community service would be a huge component that maybe staff can just spend a little bit of time on.
I think I'd like to find out what exactly Community Foundation is and how one gets started and what its role is in the community. And to me, it seems like it would be an ear in a second.
It's a different
This Community Foundation it's more of a general umbrella, but I figure it's an ear for the community, and it could be the catalyst to start these but I just don't know how one's formed and how cities have done it, and so that's something I'd like to see, because I think that would open up more.
And just a little bit, I don't know about it. I know that in the case of South County here, the San Diego Foundation provided a staff member that helps put the whole thing together, which is probably how it works. But I think that that's something that's our staff can bring back once they contact them and figure it out. Because it is a group that's really, I've looked at the list. There's quite a few people in different communities that get involved in it. And it'd be some of the folks that we know, because part of it is asking people for a little money to help support some of the things around the community. So I think that's a really good thing, but they've got to do some research. Like I said, I don't know the details.
Well, I think that one of the issues too is, the formation of a 501c3. Because I was on
But
the
I think
founding members of.
they're under a different umbrella. See, so that's the whole thing. I think they should we should ask them, or through the staff, tell us how to do this. I know that that's what when they started this a year or two ago, or maybe even longer, that's what they did. They went to certain cities. I think Chula Vista was one of the first, because they were willing to. They were able to staff it with some Chula Vista folks. But this foundation, I know, brought in some of their own folks too. And that's really where they have the background, which is where some city staffs, we don't have that. But Any other thoughts? I mean, I think that when we're looking at number one, I think the Parks and Recs, and I think we agree if we can try to roll in the youth and the seniors into one, I think that should be the priority for the staff to bring back to us. I think this community foundation idea, everybody seems to be really supportive of that idea. The one thing we passed over was the budget thing, and I know that right now we're not in a hurry on the budget because we're in a cycle. We got how much longer to go, Mr. Hall?
Believe it or not, we'll be back probably within a year working on the next 2-year budget.
And Mr. Spriggs, you mentioned that would if we had a committee that was only set up like 6 months in advance of a budget, you think that's enough to give input for a community? Because I think it's something we should plan on too. Because that's a hard thing for people to understand. We've been in these meetings where it's so hard that people don't even want to bother coming because it's difficult.
I think that's a good starting point for thinking, Mr. Mayor. The whole idea is for to get people involved in before the budget is prepared, in helping to identify priorities and to try to accommodate as many of those priorities as is reasonably possible for the city to accommodate, so that there's a give and take. So identifying what public priorities are, community priorities are, as part of the budget process is what this would be doing. And so 6 months ahead of the presentation would probably be enough if we actually move quickly to formulating a way to engage communities so that they've got about a 6-month lead time. I think that would be really good.
Okay, so that's something I think that we should be considered. Once again, that wouldn't have to be jumped at because we got a little bit of time, but if we ask the staff to consider that, because we have to look at it before we actually set up the committee. So to give us the time on that, Mr. Hall, that's the big thing there. And I think I kind of like your recommendation on the sea level rise with Tidelands. It makes it simple. We've got a committee that's already been put together. They don't have as much as they did in the past to deal with, so this might be something that would be very good for them to be involved in. Ms. Bragg, did you have?
Thank you. We did have some public speakers that brought forward some pretty good ideas, I thought, too, as far as a community garden commission, but I can see that coming under Parks and Rec because gardening can be a form of recreation. So, as far as tasking some of these commissions, I think that would be a good fit there. The Technology Commission that was mentioned, I know we have a staff member that is really into technology. And, there's some really neat things happening with apps that can be painted on sidewalks as far as, when you have visitors and they can, I'm not very technology driven, but you point your phone at it and then it'll tell you where your restaurants are and your shopping and all that kind of thing. So there's some really cool things happening out there and I'm not sure where a technology commission, where that kind of thing would fit into one of these, but
I think, on those lines, and just because I've talked to Mr. Hall quite often, without a committee or a commission, I think that's one of the tasks he's taken on is to try to bring some of that technology to the city of Imperial Beach, whether it be through our website or through other means. And I think that from us driving that, unless we have direct suggestions on it, I think that a committee might not be what that would be. It'd be more technological experts and then do marketing type of thing. Because remember, we talked about marketing and we wanted the city to get a little bit more into the marketing.
Well, I also remember at a council meeting not too long ago when Mr. Patton brought up that at his school they send out a group text to all the parents and asked, could we do that here? And Mr. Hall, I'm not picking on you, Andy, but you were like, huh? What? So, there's a whole generation of people out there, who would probably love to share that expertise with us. Yeah, exactly.
Wow.
So, just looking to kind of pare down some staff time and see, if there's volunteers out there who want to do this kind of thing for us.
And then, Mr. Bilbrey, on the Planning Commission, I'm not necessarily against or for, but I know it's a lot more complicated than one of these other advisory commissions. You did bring up some aspects of legal. End of it, I would first like to have the staff bring us back the legalities involved with a planning commission. I know that in San Diego County there are correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Hall, I think there's at least 4 other cities, and most of them are larger than ours, that do not have planning commissions?
Yeah, Mayor, that's correct. There are several cities in the county that do not have planning commissions. Some of them are larger. I know Poway does not. I believe Santee does not. And then there are some that are smaller that do, Del
Okay.
Mar. So yeah, it's a little bit all over the map.
So, but I mean, the legal part bothers me a little bit, so I think we need to get a feedback from staff on that one before we go too far into that and find out where we're doing. I know that the time that I've been here without a planning commission, and it was gone a long time before I got here, I don't believe, and Mr. Way might be able to help me on that, I don't know if there's ever been an appeal. There has been one appeal to the council, all right, and, but those are the type of things we have to look at. But I mean, it's not like we're a growing community with a lot of open space and extra land. We're a built-out community. We don't see that much.
No, but the reason why I'm thinking that it'd be good to bring this up now is the fact that we're hoping for more development in the city, or redevelopment, I should say, along Seacoast, a lot of the vacant lots. And if we're going to do it, it should probably be now.
Because we do have a design review board still, and they function very well. They're very experienced. They put a lot of things. I know legally they have a different thing involved, but we do get a lot of input from them, and they just get to see a lot more projects than even we do. So,
I remember when we had our planning commission, and it was during the tenure of Mayor Bixler. And some of our previous planning commissioners were Pat Romero, Leonard Lucanen, Paul Slayton, Mr. Palmer, Ted Powers. One of the things that I found advantageous about it, it was another level of vetting a project, or vetting, stop signs. They dealt with a lot of things, and gave a lot of recommendation, again, going back to that vetting process. It didn't deal just strictly with projects, so there was, by the time something came to council, there was another body that had looked at whatever it was that was on their agenda, and had a lot of input into, whether or not something should go forward, how it should go forward. I remember when it was disbanded, and it was pretty controversial. Members of the community were pretty upset about it. Others thought, well, maybe it's time that we don't have a planning commission. But I have to say I was disappointed to see it go.
well, I think what we'll do is we'll start looking into that. I think that the other ones to get more community involvement that don't have quite the same legal requirements, because there's a lot more to a planning commission than there is an advisory group on parks or youth or budgets or something like that. So I think that's something else that the staff should get back to us on, and what it entails to do something like that. And then at that time, we can make some decisions on it.
I do know that it took up an awful lot of the planning department time.
And I think those are all the things we're gonna have to
There was
consider.
a lot to
And it might
that.
be that we have a planning commission and no design review board. I mean, it depends on how we wanna do it and where those assets, but I think the staff needs to give us a little bit of background and a little history on how those all work. And definitely in the legal side of it that Mr. Bilbray brought
And I
up.
think at that time, each council member was able to make an appointment to the planning commission.
It's
so-
very political, huh?
Yeah.
Mr. Hall, do you have any thoughts that you wanna ask us a question before you go forward and come back to us?
No, I think that was a very helpful conversation. I don't know if the staff members have any questions, but I think that we can bring back a lot of information on Parks and Recreation, potential for a community foundation, finance committee, what it would mean to add the sea level issues to the Tidelands Commission. I don't know about this technology stuff, but maybe we'll bring back something on that. And then we'll be sure to present the legal issues to the city council surrounding the planning commission, what it means for appeals and some of those kinds of things, what their workload might be, given what Councilman Bilbray said about maybe future development or redevelopment of the city, and then, the benefits of vetting the projects through another board. That's what I had down as action items, if that seems consistent with what you've heard.
We missed one, and I think that's
The
looking into
interns
the
and
interns and
yes, I'm sorry,
volunteers
yes.
issues and ways and means we could do that at a low staff low-cost basis.
We're not gonna let that
Gotcha.
go. So is, so means of that? So
Yeah.
that,
That's a good direction, yeah.
that looks pretty good to us then. So we'll expect you to come back with some of those, not all at once necessarily, but I think that the council definitely thinks Parks and Rec, so I would hope that that would be the first thing you bring back to us.
Sure.
Community Foundation definitely has might have a very good advantage if they're able to help support things going around the community financially as well as volunteer-wise.
Good.
So,
Thank you all. Appreciate that direction.
looking good on that, and then we do have a, closed session item coming up here.
The item on consent?
I
that got pulled.
apologize, item 2.4, Mr. Hall.
Well, Mr. Mayor, I wanted to pull this from consent before Mr. Hall introduces the actual subject matter because, you know, I think we all are interested in public safety and, you know, something that's through public safety in the community ought to be brought out into the daylight and discussed by the council. Not that it's controversial at all. It looks very straightforward. Also, the considerations leading to this are worthy of public, I think, discussion, and, you know, a short briefing by you would be very appreciated.
You bet. Mayor and council, as you know, the area of Cherry and 11th Street and down to the Public Works facility is an area that's very much a residential area, but has been impacted both by our Public Works activities. We have a lot of comings and goings, trucks and equipment going back and forth from the Public Works facility, as well as an industrial building at the end of a residential street. And not only that, there's also an elementary school right in that same area. And so I had met with some of the residents, heard some of their concerns. They had some suggestions of things we could do to perhaps even beautify the area around the Public Works facility. But one of the things that they had mentioned is that the employees that frequent the industrial building at the end of Cherry come and go through that neighborhood rather fast. And there's no stop sign that is coming out of that facility at the current time, even though we recently, the city council approved putting a sidewalk in there for the students to walk to Bayside Elementary School. So recognizing that we're encouraging the kids to walk on that sidewalk and the fact that there's no stop sign coming out of that facility, we identified the fact that we could put a stop sign there in the public right-of-way that would at least require people to stop coming out of that facility right before that new sidewalk that we put in. So for safety purposes, we thought it would be a great idea to include a stop sign in that particular location and continue to work with the neighbors on an area that is impacted more than a lot of our residential areas with non-residential uses.
Mr. Hall, thank you very much for that. I think that brings out exactly the reasons for this item being on the agenda. That sidewalk that's very apparent on the attachment 3, should that have or does that require that sidewalk a crosswalk striping so that it's another reason people should respect people on that sidewalk in that intersection is because it's a crosswalk and you got to give way to pedestrians?
Our staff actually did paint a new crosswalk up at Cherry and 11th Street that allows people to cross there. I don't believe we need a crosswalk where that stop sign is. There's a cross gutter there, and it's actually part of the railroad right-of-way. And so it might be a good idea to perhaps put some hash marks or something actually right across the sidewalk so that they recognize that's a sidewalk and call out that that's a sidewalk. Because if you've been there, there's some fencing there, and it's the railroad right-of-way is kind of fenced off. It's just a crosswalk probably wouldn't show up right there, but perhaps coloring the sidewalk would be helpful.
And, you know, in our agenda packages, the letter from the property management folks to their tenants, and because I do have a history with that building, it's probably advisable in this because a big portion of that building's tenant is somebody that does training through its vocational training, but those folks are not there on a 365-day-a-year basis. so they don't know the neighborhood as well. They come in for 4 weeks or 8 weeks or whatever it is, so there's a big turnover of those. The normal tenants, of course, are familiar because they come there every day. So I think it's a good idea to put something like this there because it's just an awareness thing because they're new to the neighborhood. They probably may not even be from Imperial Beach, but they aren't even aware there might be a school half a block around the corner. So I think that's kind of good, and I'm glad that the property owner and the property management folks see fit to let us work on that.
Well, if there's no further discussion, I would move that we adopt that resolution for the installation.
Mr. Patton, go ahead.
And chime in real quick. I noticed, and I'm sure the deputy will concur with me, Home Depot or at not Mervyn's, whatever, Walmart, those stop signs in like a shopping center, you see people kind of run them quite often. Not me. I would want to make sure that this is very clear that this is the real deal and not kind of like I'm just slowing you down a little. And I don't know how that's done, but making sure that this, like, I know the stripes possibly, or like you mentioned, the crosswalk makes it the real deal. But that's just, if we're going to do it, let's do it right.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. We'll try to do that. We'll probably also, we can look at the MUTCD and see if there's a possibility of placing a school crossing sign together with the stop sign so that they understand, because that's a new sidewalk. That's a new facility that hasn't been there all these years. And so we want to make sure they understand that is actually a route to school. And we'll see what the manual says about where we can place that. There are some legalities about placing school zone signs outside of a school zone. I mean, the reality is there's different penalties, as again the officer will tell us, and we want to make sure that we follow all the regulations. But I think it's good for them to understand how close they are to a school. The school's literally just a few hundred feet away from that location.
Give them those Texas jokes, you know?
That's right. We've got a volunteer.
So we have a motion, and I'll make the second. Any further comment? Could we please vote?
Motion carried unanimously.
I adjourn a regular meeting, and we're going to go into closed session. We will be back out of closed session for report outs. Thank you all.